Hi, are you thinking about going on a river cruise? Perhaps the Rhine and Moselle River Cruise with Scenic? Great choice. Here's some information that might be useful. My sister and I took the Rhine and Moselle River Cruise with Scenic in 2019. It was a 15-day river cruise from Amsterdam to Basel, Switzerland. Our ship was the Scenic Jasper. This was not our first river cruise, but it was our first river cruise with Scenic. We flew into the Amsterdam airport on April 23rd. A Scenic representative met us at a designated spot. We rode to the ship with 3 other women from Canada. The driver pointed out things of interest and provided us with some great information regarding Amsterdam and the Netherlands in general. Upon arrival at the ship, our luggage was whisked away from us and we were invited into the River Cafe for a light lunch. This was a special treat as we had expected to have to venture out to purchase our lunch. But instead, after a very welcome light lunch, we set out on our own to go for a canal cruise. As usual, prior to a trip, I did a huge amount of research, using the itinerary provided to help narrow down what we might like to see where. But despite that, there were lots of unanswered questions that I would only get the answers to by going on the trip. If you're a planner like I am, you don't just pack, head out, and hope you'll see everything you want to see when you get there. You want to be somewhat informed. There are always things you won't know until you get there, but perhaps some of the following information will help. We chose April to take this cruise because it would not be too hot and it was tulip time. Everything I had seen online suggested that there would be tulips around every corner between March to mid-May, especially halfway through April. Admittedly, we didn't spend a lot of time in Amsterdam, but we were in the Netherlands for several days, and the only tulips we saw were in a past their best before display in the central station. Actually, we didn't see our first real tulips until we reached Germany. So if you're planning to see tulips on your trip to the Netherlands, you might want to include a special side trip to the Keukenhof Gardens. They're about 40 kilometers outside of Amsterdam, and you might want to plan for at least half a day. One interesting thing we found was that the ship had both a river cam and a lounge cam. These are helpful because you can see where the ship is going even when you're in your cabin, and you can listen to and watch the pre-dinner port talk from the privacy of your own cabin if you're running late or if you don't want to go to the lounge. We found that it was worth it to spend a bit more and stay on the diamond deck. It gives you a bit more personal attention from your butler and includes some nice extras, including an invitation to eat at Table Rive once during your trip. Everyone enjoys at least one dinner at Portobello's, which is quite lovely. Breakfast is in the Crystal Dining Room from 7 to 9, but you can also catch an early bird breakfast in the River Cafe at 6:30 or a late riser breakfast in the River Cafe from 9 to 10. The River Cafe is a great alternative for lunch. The menu is an abbreviated version of what is being served in Crystal Dining without the formality and with fewer people. And you can graze at the River Cafe throughout the morning and afternoon whenever you like. They will also pack you a lunch if you're planning to set out on your own for the day. One of the things we appreciated was the ability to dine with others, or just unwind at a table for 2 in the main dining room. People are generally very friendly when on vacation, but sometimes you just want to unwind and have a quiet meal. While Scenic advertises that everyone has use of their own private butler, you should know that the level of service varies depending on which cabin you have or what level you are staying on. For example, those traveling on the Jewel deck receive early morning tea or coffee service and shoe shine and valet services, and everyone is able to stuff all they can into one laundry bag once during the trip. However, those on the Sapphire deck also received beverage services within their suite, and those on the Diamond deck or in the junior suites have in-suite breakfast services, receive an exclusive invitation to dine at Table Rive once during their trip, and can request priority dining reservations. Essentially, the more you pay, the more butler services you will receive, like the daily delivery of savory and sweet canapes or fruit in your junior, royal, or panorama suite. In fact, in the royal suite, they'll unpack for you, bring you a daily newspaper, serve drinks and meals in your room. So be sure to know what you're entitled to. We were on the diamond deck and really appreciated having 2 pieces of clothing pressed each day. It meant that we didn't have to go down to dinner in a wrinkled outfit. Everyone has a stocked mini fridge in their suite, which is restocked at least once daily. Just let them know what you prefer to have in it. If during your pre-trip research you watch some of the lovely scenic videos about your upcoming trip, please remember that the people in the videos have the ability to go to more than one of the excursions you have to choose from. So don't be misled into thinking that you can necessarily do what they're doing. They have private guides who take them to see things that might not be offered to you. We had a film crew on board during our trip, and were given a CD of the trip later on, and it is safe to say that there were aspects of the trip portrayed on the CD that in no way jibed with what we did. That isn't to say that we didn't have a great time. Of course we did. But it's important, I think, to realize that the individual attention being portrayed in the videos might not be exactly what's on offer. Rather, it is a suggestion of things you might do, in some cases, if you perhaps plan your day and go your own way. But there's no doubt that no matter what you choose, you'll love it. Perhaps another piece of advice would be, know your limitations. If you are not a great walker, don't go on a hike. And if you haven't ridden a bike in 30 years, perhaps going on a 3-hour bike tour isn't an appropriate choice. No matter what cruise company you choose, I think it's safe to say that you won't be overwhelmed with the information ahead of your trip. The itineraries indicate a few choices, but without sufficient detail, so you may find that the excursion you thought you wanted to do may no longer be what you end up doing. A piece of advice: know your itinerary before you travel, but don't get your heart set on one particular aspect of the trip, just in case, for whatever reason, that doesn't pan out. For example, we were really looking forward to going to Luxembourg, but the Duke died just as we arrived in Europe, so we were, to some extent, discouraged to go in case we wouldn't be able to see what we'd planned to see. Not a huge deal. With visions of getting stuck in a bus in traffic all morning, we went to Trier instead. It was a great alternative. As it turned out, those who braved the trip to Luxembourg said it was fantastic. The video crew had a wonderful time, as we later saw on the CD. Also, on the day we were in the Alsace, we could either take a walking tour of Strasbourg or a tour of the Alsace wine region. In both cases, we'd be back at the ship for a late lunch. What we didn't know until the night before was that we could have gone on the wine tour in the morning, had lunch on board, and then bussed into Strasbourg to spend the afternoon. A bit of a missed opportunity, we thought, but by the time we figured out that we could have done both, it was too late. It's nice to know, and yet not always obvious, when you can do both a planned excursion and spend free time in the small town or village where the ship is docked. Know your options before you head out. The great thing about Scenic versus some of the other river cruise companies is that everything is included, all of the excursions. You're not being nickeled and dimed, and you don't have to decide months in advance what you think you'll want to do on a given day, and you enjoy preferential treatment along the way. This can prove to be a big deal. On a previous river cruise with another river cruise company, we paid extra to go to Versailles, well in advance of our trip. But when the day arrived, it was incredibly hot. The lineup to get into Versailles was long. We fed into a long line of pushing tourists, including school children. We were cut off from our guide and had to move along with the crowd to the point where we couldn't stop to look at anything. It was awful, only to return to the ship and realize that those who had remained on board had sailed through the afternoon on the top deck with drinks, having a wonderful time. Of course, we hadn't known about that option months prior to the trip. They never seem to tell you when you can simply enjoy an afternoon of cruising down the river. With Scenic, you don't ever seem to get caught up in long lineups. When we arrived in Rudesheim, we were given lanyards, and when we got to the cable car, there was a huge lineup. But when they saw our Scenic lanyards, they said, "Oh, Scenic, right this way," and they led us to the head of the line. That was a real treat, You go to the head of the line and don't have to spend your vacation going from one lineup to the next. I also recall a spectacular evening at Rastatt Palace where we were treated to a champagne reception, tour, and an exclusive concert put on just for us. And, of course, unlike ocean cruises, you're not jostling with thousands of other passengers. Our ship's capacity was only 163 passengers. On a river cruise, you arrive at a destination and just walk off the ship. And in many instances, you are exactly where you want to be. There are certainly excursions to vineyards, etc., but many people are happy to just spend the day where they disembark, enjoying a tour of that town or village. Things not to be missed on the romantic Rhine and Moselle River Cruise. When in Amsterdam, make sure to go on a canal cruise. Tour the lovely village of Veer in the Netherlands, and if you like to bike, be sure to take the guided bike tour. We were able to go for a lovely bike ride through the countryside in the morning and had lots of time to stroll through Veer at our leisure later in the day. Bruges, Belgium is a lovely little place with its cobbled streets, canals, and shops with chocolates of every description. The archaeological park and the artifacts that have been uncovered in Xanten are amazing and definitely worth a visit. And Xanten itself was lovely. We recommend the cream puffs in the bakery on the square. Be sure to take the cable car up to the Ehrenbreitstein Fortress in Koblenz. The ride is enjoyable and the view is breathtaking. The cable car in Kochum is also worth taking. While more like a ski lift, it provides a great view of the town, as well as Reichsburg Castle, which is definitely worth seeing. Also, if you enjoy tasting a wide variety of mustards and like sausage, the mustard factory is worth a visit. It's hard to imagine that it would be necessary to go sample sausages with mustard, cream puffs and hot chocolate, and in Rudesheim, their famous Rudesheim coffee and delicious tort, when you can have absolutely anything you want to eat and drink on board, but some things are hard to pass up. We recommend the Café Engel Rudesheim for amazing drinks, such as the Rudesheim coffee and desserts. The menu itself looks almost good enough to eat. At most stops, you can request the use of their e-bikes. Many people on board took advantage of the bike tour along the Moselle River, meeting the ship in Bergkastel quays. I understand that everyone thoroughly enjoyed it. While sailing along the Moselle and the Rhine Gorge, it's a perfect time to get some exercise on the top deck while walking on the track. Alternatively, you can sit and have a drink in any number of the perfect viewing spots on board, but we found that it pays to exercise a bit when you're overindulging. We spent time in the gym every day. As I mentioned, we didn't get to Luxembourg, but from what we gather, it was amazing, and should we have another opportunity, we will definitely fit that in. We were fascinated by the grapevines on every hillside as we cruised along. Seemingly, if there was a spot to put a vine, it was already there. It was also fascinating to see the trains on either side of the river wending their way in and out of the tunnels built into the riverbanks. Bergkastel was a lovely little place and well worth strolling through. However, if you take a side trip as we did to Trier and you're interested in seeing the Landshut Castle ruins, don't dawdle or you'll run out of time. Of course, Heidelberg Castle, built 300 feet above the city, is well worth a visit. Parts of it are in ruins and parts of it are in use today. The first part of the castle was built in 1300 AD. One of the buildings in use houses the Heidelberg Tun, which is the world's largest wine barrel circa 1751, holding 220,000 liters. It boasts a dance floor on top. Our evening at Rastatt Palace and the Upper Rhine Valley was memorable, with a reception in the ancestral hall, a tour of some select rooms, and a lovely concert. And as if dinner on board, a champagne reception, and a concert weren't enough, a late-night repast was set up in the lounge upon our return to the ship. Strasbourg, France, was seen to have a unique culture, with a mix of French and German. We docked in Kiel, Germany, and took a 15-minute bus ride to Strasbourg. Hold tight to your map. The layout of the city is interesting, to say the least. It was fun to see, over and over, fellow passengers trying to figure out how to get back to where the bus was parked, turning the map around and around to get a different perspective. In the end, a large number of us walked together, hoping that there would be safety in numbers. They'd come looking for us if more of us were lost. One of our favorite things was our cable car ride in the Black Forest. The ride took us 1,284 meters above sea level to Freiburg's highest address. What a great view. As luck would have it, my sister and I had the tour guide in our cable car, so we enjoyed an informative chat with her during a 20-minute trip up. Once we had our fill of the view, we went on a 5 km hike and were rewarded at the end with some Black Forest cake in the town. What a great time we had. We, of course, have already signed up for our next Scenic River Cruise. The Scenic ships are nicely appointed, and the staff are great and happy to please. They wished us well as we departed on our various excursions and greeted us warmly when we returned. The omelet maker got to know what I wanted if I queued up, and once the dinner wait staff figured out my preference for wine at dinner, a bottle would miraculously appear at my table as soon as I sat down. A note about dinner. The menu has daily options, but if you prefer to just have a steak or a chicken breast, all you have to do is ask. Also, they have recommended wine pairings each day, but if, like me, you prefer something else, all you have to do is ask. It's great. Such special attention to detail will keep us coming back to Scenic, and will keep us going back to the exercise room each day that we are on board. And the walking track on top comes in handy. It's a great way to enjoy the countryside as you're cruising along. Being pampered is great, but there's a price to pay in extra pounds if you indulge too much. I can definitely say that everything was fitting just a little tighter. We rounded off our trip with an extra day and night in Zurich, with a 3-hour tour of the city and a 1-hour cruise on Lake Zurich. The Scenic recommended Hotel Schweizerhof is lovely. All in all, a perfect end to our trip. I hope you found some of this information helpful, and that you'll have an opportunity to enjoy a river cruise with Scenic in the not too distant future. Cheers!